What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to examine an issue of the X-Men. Today, I'm examining X-Men issue 66. This is the last issue of the Silver Age X-Men. Starting in issue 67, you get reprints of previous issues, and that goes on for about 5 years. And I have to say, I haven't hated the last 10-ish issues of the series. I think once Neil Adams came on board, really, even before that, the Jim Steranko, Arno Drake run, I think that's when the series actually started getting pretty good. There were a few stinkers here and there, but I think the series picked up in quality. I think starting with when the X-Men met Lorna Dane and Mesmero, I think the series started getting pretty solid from that point on. And I would love to have seen some interviews with people being pretty candid about how and why the series was canceled, because I've seen, like, decades after the fact, Chris Claremont would talk about the series was starting to pick up in sales right around the time that it was canceled, and then 5 years later they got the sales information and decided to bring the series back. And that does not make sense to me. I don't buy that they canceled the series and then waited 5 years to get sales information. Even in the early 70s, I don't believe that it took that long to get sales information. I have to believe that there was some other reason why they decided to bring the series back. Now, I do believe that sales probably increased a little bit once Neil Adams came on board. I think he absolutely revolutionized the way that comics could be done from an artistic point of view. And you even look at some of the artists who came on, like Don Heck did a fill-in issue just a couple of issues ago, and his work in the midst of Neil Adams' run looks significantly different than his work earlier in the series. So I think that Neil Adams showed other artists this is what you can do. You can kind of play around with panel layout, and you can have a character take up an entire page doing something, and I think that's really interesting, and that made for better comics. But anyway, let's get to talking about this issue. This one is written by Roy Thomas with pencils by Sal Buscema, who is the younger brother of John Buscema, and Sal would later go on to do some more X-Men stuff in the 80s, but this is inked by Sam Granger with lettering by Artie Simek. And as we saw at the end of the previous issue, Professor Xavier was able to repel an alien invasion, and then he passed out. He is now in a coma here, and all the X-Men look really sad. Polaris starts crying, and then Havoc is giving her the shoulder to cry on, and Bobby, he starts yelling and saying, you know, stay away from my girl, and once again someone says, hey, are you two actually dating? This has been 2 or 3 times now that someone has kind of mentioned this. At one point, Polaris told Jean, yeah, Bobby's okay, but we're not really a couple, and then just in the previous issue, Jean was thinking, man, Bobby's not gonna like that, and now here, Bobby doesn't like it. He's being really possessive and just not really being likable, and I wouldn't say I've ever really liked Iceman in these issues, but he's being even worse now. But Iceman is yelling about it, and then Cyclops basically says, hey guys, Professor X is in a coma, that's more important, and both Havoc and Iceman, they apologize, and then someone gets the idea, let's go get the mind probe. And apparently there was an issue of Avengers where Hank Pym invented a mind probe, and this is based off of those designs, and then Professor X is able to tell the X-Men, go find the Hulk. And then Jean, she's like, well, I can also use my telepathy, why didn't I think of that? So she goes into his mind, and once again, all she sees are images of the Hulk. So the X-Men all go to fight the Hulk, with the exception of Alex, Polaris, and Iceman. Alex is asked by Cyclops, the professor has many enemies, why don't you stay here and protect him? And then Polaris says, I think I'll stay here too. And then Iceman says, and me. And Iceman just was finished being a butthead like 2 panels ago, and now he's back. I guess apparently his girlfriend is more important than Professor Xavier's life. You look on the cover, which is actually a really cool cover. I like this cover a lot. Hulk and the X-Men duking it out in Vegas. I think that looks pretty cool. You see Iceman on the cover throwing some ice towards the Hulk, but he's barely in this issue. So if you can believe that there are people out there who like Iceman, which is hard for me to believe, but if there were Iceman fans back then, I would have been a little disappointed that he's barely in this issue, and then you don't get a new issue of X-Men for another 5 years, and they didn't know that we were going to be getting more new X-Men. Once you see in the next month where you get an old issue of Juggernaut, you might be thinking, oh, no more X-Men ever, and the last issue of X-Men, Iceman was barely in it. But anyway, So everyone, with the exception of those three, they go to Las Vegas, where somehow Hulk is just walking in the street, and the X-Men happen to find him, and then Angel goes off by himself. Now, we've seen Angel do this before. He always acts really I don't know what word I'm trying to use. I can't speak English right now. He's very cocky and thinks that he can handle this by himself. And let's be honest, Angel can fly, and that's it. He might be able to maneuver pretty well in the air, but going up against the Hulk, there's not a whole lot he could do. I really feel like the X-Men should have got some kind of strategy together on their way to Las Vegas. Jean has telepathy, and she does eventually use her telepathy to kind of calm the Hulk down, and then he falls down and he becomes Bruce Banner. Why didn't they just wait and let Jean approach the Hulk? Because once he sees Angel, he says, "Oh, more masked people, I'll attack you." And I guess this is because he's had lots of run-ins with the Avengers before, and they're always trying to bring him in. And the X-Men, they just want to know, what's your connection with Charles Xavier? Because they're able to figure out that it's probably Professor Xavier has a connection with Bruce Banner, not necessarily the Hulk. And so they're able to make him turn back into Banner, and then eventually he's able to figure out, oh yeah, there's this machine that I invented. It's one of my secret labs, and it's supposed to help do something. He and Professor X, they had a correspondence years ago. I'm assuming before Professor X ever formed the X-Men, although we don't know. But then Glenn Talbot, he shows up, and I don't know when he first appeared in the Hulk comics, but he was kind of filling in for Thunderbolt Ross here, I guess, and he comes in. He believes that the X-Men might actually be allies to the Hulk. The X-Men say, no, all we want is to ask him a few questions, and Talbot's like, no, you're not going to do that. But then Banner hulks back out. He goes out into the middle of the desert. The X-Men follow him, and then Hulk kind of spars with some of the X-Men a little bit, and then we see that he is right at his secret lab that he talked about. And then the Hulk, he starts breaking stuff, and then the lab is destroyed, but Angel was able to get the doohickey that they need to help Professor Xavier. So they go back to New York, they press a button, Xavier is fine, and everyone is happy. And then at the end it says, and they kept on fighting, question mark, or something like that. And so I guess they knew when they were making this comic, no more X-Men comics after this. But going back to what I was saying at the beginning of this video, I am really curious when they knew they were going to be canceled. Did they know when they were making 65 that they weren't going to be getting any more comics after 66? I'm very curious how spur of the moment this cancellation was. But this issue is fine. It's pretty filler. Again, like I said in my video about issue 65, it's hard to care about something revolving around Professor X since we don't get any more stuff with Professor X in the status quo. He comes back in issue 65, he passes out, and then the X-Men help him. It's hard to care. I feel like it would have been better if we could have seen a little bit more of how Professor X would have interacted with the X-Men after they've been out on their own for so long without his help. Would we have gotten a situation where the X-Men said, we don't really need your help anymore, and then he recruits new students? I don't know. Also, really weird to me that the series keeps wanting to not use Polaris and Havoc. Both of them were introduced a little while back, and they haven't really been part of the team. Polaris is introduced in that 2 or 3 part Mesmero storyline, and then we don't see any of her for like 5 issues. And then Alex is introduced in the Living Pharaoh storyline, and then he doesn't really become part of the team. He does kind of help against the Sentinels, then he gets wounded, then they take him to Dr. Lycos, and then that's what kicks off the Sauron storyline, and then they defeat Sauron without his or Polaris' help. Then they go to the Savage Land, again without either of those two. The series introduces these 2 new characters and kind of half-heartedly keeps them around but doesn't do anything with them. Why introduce new characters if you're not going to let them be part of the team? And I wonder if they thought 7 members of the X-Men is way too much. We can't keep a series going with 7 members, so maybe they were toying with getting rid of someone if they had kept going. I don't know, but anyway, that is it for the Silver Age X-Men. But as I said a couple of videos ago, I am going to try to tackle some of the non-X-Men issues that the X-Men appear in between now and 1975. There's maybe 12 issues, so if you're kind of impatient, I will try my best to burn through these pretty fast. I'm not going to drag my feet on these or anything, but if you are looking forward to Giant Size, don't worry, I am too, especially after some of the real awful X-Men comics that I've gotten through to get here, but we are close now. It's not going to take long, but it's going to be like like issues of Marvel Team Up, Amazing Spider-Man, a few issues of the Hulk. So hopefully you guys will stick around as I examine some issues of other comics that are not the X-Men. Not every X-Men appearance from 1970 to 1975 will be showing up in this series. There is a 3-part crossover between the Avengers and Daredevil. I do not have every part of that crossover. It's issue 110 and 111 of Avengers and issue 99 of Daredevil. I have issue 99 of Daredevil and issue 111, I think, of Avengers collected in Essential Daredevil Volume 4, I think. But for some reason, they did not collect issue 110 in that book. So I do not have issue 110, and I think it would be really weird to do an examination on the last 2/3 of a 3-part storyline with the X-Men appearing in issue 110, but not actually cover that issue that has the X-Men. I think the X-Men do appear in the last 2 parts of the Daredevil issue and that other Avengers issue. I've read those, but it's been a few years since I've read those, and I don't really remember much about it, but it's a Magneto story, and I'm not going to go spend $15 on a book so that I can have one issue to examine in this series. So there might be some other X-Men appearances in the early 70s that I have missed. I'm only going to be talking about stuff that I have that's collected in the back half of Essential X-Men Volume 3, as well as I do have one Essential Hulk volume that has a couple of issues I'll be talking about. So anyway, that's about it here. In the meantime, consider this issue examined.